All right. My guest today is one of our heroes at HRC Ministries. Her name is Jill Lavasseur. She's the client support director at Engedi Refuge Ministries. Engedi has one of the most effective restoration programs in our nation, and she is a big reason for that. But she wasn't always on staff. She has a very interesting story. And since we're about to launch our own program, I thought, who better than to talk to Jill as we're getting ready to launch the program. So let's do that. Jill, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you on here. Let me move some stuff around on my computer screen so I can make sure that I can read the questions that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Okay. All right. With the coronavirus going on, that was the first thing I was going to say. How are you doing with that? And how is it affecting you guys as an organization? Is it affecting you personally at all? How are you guys doing over at Engedi with all the corona stuff?
Yeah, I think it's affecting everybody personally in some way. I'm actually working from home today because we picked up two residents, and until they get their tests done, I've technically could have been exposed. So we're doing everything that we can to keep um, staff and residents safe. Um, Personally, it's tough, right? My kids are at home doing school, so I'm a homeschool teacher and a PE teacher and a principal and a parent, and so it's been tough, and um, I'm looking forward to when life gets back to normal, whatever that means, right?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of makes you appreciate the schools a lot more. I keep seeing
Oh, ugh, absolutely.
I keep seeing all these memes of people that show homeschool moms before COVID and homeschool moms after COVID, and it's like Wonder
Yeah,
Woman.
yeah, exactly. I know. And our sports, like, what is it like to watch a Seahawks game with no fans there? It's so weird. It's
Yeah, it's
just
definitely
everything
weird.
about it is weird. And the fake clapping, and it just, yeah, it's so weird. So still trying to get used to it.
Well, Jill, I have the first question I've been thinking about is if I met you in high school, like who were you? What were you like growing up? Like if I didn't know anything about your past and I just meet you in the high school hallway, like who's Jill in high school?
So I went to a private high school, actually kindergarten through high school, and I ended up dropping out my freshman year. Um, Looking back on it at the time, it was anxiety, but now through therapy and looking back on life, I was bullied, and so. That played a huge effect on it. But after school, I mean, after I dropped out, I stayed obviously connected with all my friends, um, and I partied. I was just kind of your average high school kid who went to kegs and liked to get in trouble. you know, um, I started smoking weed when I was 15. Started drinking shortly thereafter. I didn't get into too much trouble, I was a fairly good kid. My dad was a police officer. My mom worked at a hospital. So,
So your dad was a
um,
cop and you dropped out of school or smoking pot and partying and you
yeah,
just told me that you were a good kid.
right. Well, he was retired at the time. So, um, but yeah, yeah, he was a canine officer in Seattle.
Holy smokes.
So, yeah, yeah. So, so I would say that I was just kind of your average everyday student, besides the fact that I dropped out. I liked to party. I loved hanging out with my friends. I played basketball and was pretty into horseback riding. Um, yeah, and then things kind of took a turn.
So talk to me about that. How did that happen? How do you go from your typical, kind of just normal party scene girl, like so many of us, me included, when I was in high school, I wasn't really serving the Lord. How do you go from just going to houses and partying and hanging out to all of a sudden ending up in the life?
Yeah. When I was 16, I met a guy who the second I met him, he stole my heart. Like I knew, I told him actually that night, like one day I'm going to marry you. Like I knew he was just the man of my dreams. And we actually started dating when I was 18, and we dated for 2.5 years. We were engaged, and one day he literally came home and said, I can't do this. I'm done, you know. And there had been things building up to it, that I just kind of ignored because we were going to get married. And he was from a very affluent family in Seattle, and so he had kind of introduced me to this lifestyle that I'd never known about. I mean, it was like private planes, and
Oh,
we're
wow.
going to the Caribbeans and Turks and Caicos, and I mean, it was, yeah, I felt like a princess. Um, and when that breakup happened, the heart that I felt, it literally felt like my heart was breaking. It hurt so bad.
Mhm.
And some friends of mine offered me some Percocet one day, and I took them, and instantly the pain was gone. I was happy. I was laughing. I was back to my old self, and it was like the wonder drug for me.
Mm.
And so, I couldn't get enough of them. And so that then turned into, Oxycontin, which then turned eventually into heroin. And then I started shooting it, and it, I just got into such a desperate place that um, I was so easily controlled by it, and would do anything for it that um, that's eventually how I met my pimp.
Oh, wow. So how did that happen?
So for me, the average age I think of trafficking is like 13. For me, it started way later in life. I was in my 30s when I met my trafficker. And looking back on it, I had been exploiting myself for a while. Um, but I met my trafficker when I was in my early 30s. And he was, like most drug dealers, he was, charming and funny, um, and he quickly found what I would do anything for, really. Um, so I was sleeping on a friend's couch at the time, and he offered me a place to stay. He said that he was there with his girlfriend and another one of his friends, and that I could come. I had a driver's license, and in the life, if you have a driver's license, that's like a big deal. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you don't have it suspended, you're not driving illegally, so I took him up on his offer to move into his house, and it quickly became my nightmare. It
Mm.
was like hell on earth. He had me locked in a house for 2.5 years, like literally like padlocked in the house. Yeah, you couldn't get out of the house unless you had a key. So the padlock was like reversed almost.
From the
I
outside
couldn't,
going in?
yeah. So you had to have a house key to get out of the house from the inside.
Wow.
And I did not have a key. Um, and anywhere I went, I had to have somebody with me at all times. Our drug use continued. It got worse. I started smoking crack, and doing heroin. And I found myself in this place where he had control of everything. He took my cell phone, and I became his property, his commodity, essentially. And he got very physically abusive. I would say probably just a couple weeks after I moved in. And this is a big guy. I mean, he's like 6'3", 300 pounds. And so he's very intimidating, to say the least.
Because, yeah, for people that don't know, how tall are you? And how tall were you back then? Or obviously your height probably wouldn't change. But.
I haven't shrunk much. I'm like 5'5", 5'6".
Okay, so significantly different.
Yeah, at the time I probably weighed 110.
Wow.
And so, yeah, he towered over me.
Yeah. So not much you could do if you wanted to resist, huh?
No, just run.
Yeah.
And hope to Jesus that he didn't catch me.
Yeah.
Which he usually did. But
man, so how long did that kind of go on until you connected with Engedi, and how did all that happen? Like, how do you go from being trapped in a house to ending up at a program?
It was one police officer that saved my life. We were coming back. Like I said, I had my driver's license, and we were going to get some dope, and I got pulled over, and I was sitting in the back of the car, in the back of the police car, and I literally had gotten pulled over right around the corner from our house. And I'll call my pimp June. Okay. June came up to the corner and was watching, like, from across the street, everything that was happening. And so I'm in the back of this cop car, and the second police came, and he walks by, and I asked him for a cigarette, and we just started talking. And he kept asking me, he's like, "What are you doing here?" Because it was a pretty well-known house. The cops were at our house all the time. It was like a 7-Eleven for drug addicts. I mean, you could come in and out of that house at any time. And so he kept asking me, like, "What? You're different than the rest. Like, what is going on?" And I was like, I don't have anywhere to go. And he's like, "He's got something on you." He kept saying that. "He has something on you. What is it?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not talking to you. You're the police." Like, what, you know? And so at the end of the conversation, he gave me his card, and he said, "If you ever need anything, call me."
Wow.
Well, I can't walk into the house with Seattle police card on. So I ended up writing his phone number on the bottom of my shoe backwards. And I called him about 2 days later, and June would let me have phones every once in a while. He would usually possess them, but like sometimes he'd leave them with me if I got a call or something like that.
Well, and you'd been with him for a long time now, so he probably had his guard down a little bit.
Yeah, and I was, he had a name for each one of us. And so my name was Pretty Bitch, is what he would call me. And so he was very, very possessive, and really he would get like jealous, and just It's hard to explain. The easiest way is just he was so possessive over me. The other two girls, they didn't really matter as much, but for me, I was like his like commodity. I was like the one. So anyways, so I called Scott and I was like, what can you do for me? Like, you
Scott's
say
the
you want to
police
help.
officer.
Scott's the police officer. Yeah. I said, you say you want to help me, but what are you going to do? Like, I have nothing. And I think we were like 3 minutes into the call and June walks in and who are you talking to? And I was like, I'm talking to my brother, like, chill out. And he grabs the phone from me and he's like, who is this? And my heart was just racing. And thankfully, Scott was smart and was like, man, I'm her brother. I'm just checking up on her to see how she's doing. And he said, well, this is how she's doing. And he started beating me up. And I'm thinking, the police are going to be at our house in 2 seconds. Well, sure enough, like a minute, it was probably like a minute and a half later. He was at the door. And
Wow.
he arrested me on a warrant. It was a fake warrant. He said that I had a warrant and that they needed to take me. So he took me to a place called Genesis Project, which is in Seattle. It's a place where, you know, girls can come in kind of off the street. They help them find programs. Are you familiar with them at all?
No, but it's like a drop-in center.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And they had just opened. So he took me there and they didn't really know what to do with me. I mean, they were like literally brand new. I think they'd been open just maybe a week. And Scott would come and check on me every day. But I was getting dope sick and I needed my dope. And so I left and I went back. And I'll never forget it. I took the bus. I took the bus to the house and I knocked on the door and he said, who is it? And I said, it's me. And he swung the door open and he gave me a hug and he said, I've been so worried about you. And then he threw me up against the wall and was choking me and was like, you will never leave me again. If you ever leave me again, I will kill you. And so he, you know, asked me all these questions that I had already kind of prepared for because I knew he had been checking the jail roster and I wasn't on the jail roster. And so I told him that I was at detox and that I just decided that I wanted to come home. So I had the opportunity at one point to leave and I didn't take it. I think for me, it was far more scarier to leave and not know what was out there or how I was going to do it on my own or where I was going to go than I knew his patterns, right? Like I could kind of, you know, although I was walking on eggshells every day, I knew his game. I knew that if I cooperated, that I would probably be okay for that day. Or if I backtalked, then, you know, I knew what was coming. And for me, it was just the unknown was just, it was really scary. And he's a master manipulator. And so I really believed that, you know, one, he would find me and kill me. And two, I believe that he loved me and that, you know, I remember when I got to Engedi, I kept saying, like, he loved me the best way he knew how. And that's kind of what he had trained me, I guess, to believe. was that I really couldn't do it without him.
Wow. How did you end up at Engedi?
So Scott did not end there. He was determined to get me out of there. And we would talk when we could. The house eventually ended up getting raided on July 1st of 2013. And I had been arrested a couple days before that for driving on suspended. By that time, my license was suspended. And so I got arrested, and they took me in for questioning. And there was these two detectives there that started questioning me on human trafficking. And I'm like, what are you guys talking? Like, we're not shipping kids over from India. Like, you're way off, you know? I had no idea what human trafficking was. I really thought that it was, you know, what we see on TV. And they just kept, you know, questioning me for hours and hours. And so finally I said, I'm not going to talk to anybody. I need to talk to Scott. And it was his day off. So they called him in. He came down, and he was like, you've got to start talking. Like, we know what's going on. We know that he's hurting you. You've got to give these guys something, or you're going to jail tonight. And so
this Scott guy sounds like he needs a medal.
He's amazing. He's amazing. We still talk a lot, and he's incredible. Wow. I remember that night he said to me, if I can't take you away from him, I'm going to take him away from you. And so they finally let me go that night. And I remember we were about to walk out of the station, and then I was like, wait a second, I've been gone for hours and I never got booked in. What am I going to say to him? And so Scott put the old school like ink on my hands, because, you know, when you get fingerprinted now, it's like digital. And so he put the old school ink on my hands, and he said, tell him that the system was down and, you know, you got fingerprinted and all this. So we had this whole story. So I went home, same kind of thing, you know, a lot of questions about where I'd been. And that was May 29th, because my daughter's birthday was the next day. And I remember thinking, I cannot be in jail for my daughter's birthday. She was living with my mom at the time, but so July 1st, our house got raided, finally. And they arrested June and myself and the there was 3 other women there at the time. And they questioned us, and for hours. I think it was like 7 hours. And then at the end, he said, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't have anywhere to go. So just take me back to the house. And so he was on his way to take me back to the house, and we stopped by the precinct so I could talk to Scott. And that's when Scott said to me, he said, you're not going back there. He said, you don't understand how big this is, and you need to get out. And so he called, I believe, REST to find out if there was any programs in the area that specialized in trauma and of course my addiction. Now, mind you, I've already been to 7 other programs by the time I got to Engedi. And so I was very reluctant that it was going to work. I was just doing it to appease him. And I was also pregnant. And so that played into it. So a short answer to the long story was basically that police officer he just never gave up on me, and he saved me. And so I chose Engedi because there was a program in LA, and then there was a program in Bellingham. And I chose Engedi ultimately because it was about an hour away from my mom and my daughter. And so that's how that happened.
What were you feeling like when you got to Engedi? I mean, were you
I was
freaking
high as a
out?
kite. I was I was high as a kite. Leah, the executive director of Engedi, and I often joke about it because I was like just out of my mind high. It was, and I had all my drugs with me, and I handed it to her because I was like, if I'm going to do this, like, I'm going to do it right this time. This is my last shot at this. And so I handed her my little drug kit, and she looked at it and she goes, "Oh my." And she like turns around and was like, just knowing her now, it was probably like, what in the world is all this stuff? uh, so I was terrified. Like I said, I was pregnant. I thought I was about 6 weeks pregnant, and I was determined to have an abortion. I had, convinced myself that if I couldn't get my life together to take care of the daughter that I had, that I didn't deserve to have another kid. And he used to always tell me that he was going to get me pregnant, and that would tie us together forever. And every month that I would have my cycle, he would I would get the worst beatings.
Just for having a
When
cycle?
just for not being pregnant.
Man.
Yeah. And so that scared me too, right? Like I didn't want to be tied to him forever. And so I figured my only option was to have an abortion. And so I went to Engedi, and from there they got me into a program it was a rehab center for women who are pregnant. And that's when I found out that I wasn't 6 weeks pregnant. I was 17 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
And there was one nurse there who was a believer. And I grew up Catholic, and I was so angry with God at that time. And I blamed him for everything. And I thought he was just this evil, like mean guy in the sky with a staff that was just like making my life horrible. I didn't realize that there was like free will in it, but it was like, I blamed him for everything. And so one night she came into my room, and she gave me a little, I still have it. It was a little red New Testament. And in it, she wrote a note on the front page. And right away I knew that I had to keep this child, that this baby she saved my life. And that there was a plan and a purpose for her, and that that I couldn't give up on her is really what I knew it right away.
Wow, just because somebody gave you a note, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
So, yeah.
What So talk to me a little bit. You've been through 7 programs and now you're walking into Engedi. What are you expecting Engedi to be like? And then what were the differences, and like how did Engedi really help you versus these other programs? I mean,
Yeah.
7 programs is quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah, just about anywhere from here to San Diego. I think I've been to all of them. I, it being a faith-based program, I thought they were going to be these Bible thumpers that we had to like sit around and learn verses, and they were going to throw Jesus down my throat at any chance I got. And I really had this preconceived notion, and honestly, I didn't really have any expectation. I didn't think that it was going to work. I thought I was broken. I was so broken that there was no fixing me. And so I think what the difference about Engedi is, these other programs, they do a good job at educating you on, what drugs are. I know what drugs are. I don't need you to tell me that. And what it does to your body. I can see what it does to my body. And so it was almost just like a place to dry out, to, make my family happy, for somewhere to go. And then you complete it, and 30 days later, you walk out the door and you're right back to where you were when you went in. You're hanging out with the same people. You're in the same town. You're doing the same thing. You don't have a job. You don't have there's no more skills that you had than when you came in there, except now you just know that you can, die from alcohol detox. I mean, they don't, there's no follow up. And the difference with Engedi was they walked life with you. They understand what trauma is and what it does to you and why it makes you respond sometimes to certain things, certain situations. There was no expectation for me to become a believer. It wasn't, they showed me Christ through their actions. And I had never felt loved. My parents are great. I mean, I love my parents, and I have a wonderful family, but I had never felt loved by 2 complete strangers the way that I did when I went there, because they didn't want anything from me. Wow. They simply wanted to help me be a better person. And I hear it all the time. Like, what's the catch? What is the catch here? And there is none. And so I started learning about, fear and, the masks that we wear, and, the life skill classes really taught me a lot about, the trauma that I experienced when I was a child. I was molested when I was in preschool, and I never thought that affected me. My parents were divorced. They get along very well, but I never really thought that affected me. The breakup was, that was a huge, that's when my world shifted. And so I learned about that. Forgiveness. I mean, they just go through this whole array of your entire life, and they teach you how to be a member of society again. I remember in the house, in June's house, I had this tiny little window, and I used to look out it in, early in the mornings, and I would see people going to work or coming home from work. And I would just be like, I always thought like, wow, I want to be that person that just goes to work and then comes home and has dinner and help. Like, it was like a dream of mine. And I had no, there, you could have never told me that I was going to get out of that life. Like, I thought that was going to be my life forever. And I thought that I was going to die there. And so Engedi really walks with you through it all. You know, I mean, they show you what, grace and forgiveness are about, and they know that you're going to slip and fall, and that's okay. They'll be there when you need to get a hand to get picked back up.
Yeah. Man, that's incredible. What about the structure of the organization itself now that you're on staff? What do you think on how they set it up was so important for you to be successful? I mean, most organizations that when we were searching to find an organization that we could, learn from, most organizations didn't have it set up the way they do.
Oh, sorry. Somebody just knocked on my door. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Most of the organizations didn't have it set up the way they did, how they had a learning center and they had multiple houses for different phases. And what about that helps women coming out of this?
That's a good question. I think having a safe house, having it separate where you have a home for the first time, for many women, they have a home. And I know for me, like, it was so important after I'd gotten back from rehab, all of my stuff was exactly how I'd left it. And that to me was huge, that they respected my stuff and they didn't touch it. I think Leah did my laundry probably because my clothes smelled so bad. But like, my pictures were where I had left them, and it was huge that they had respected me. And it became a safe home. And, for many of the women coming in, they've never had a safe home ever. And so I think that's a big one. Having access to staff, whenever we needed them was huge. In other programs, it's a closed door policy. You see your counselor, once a week for a half an hour, and you go, over whatever. At Engedi, our doors are open. And if a woman gets triggered when she's in class, she can walk out of class and go and talk to a therapist, or, come and talk to me, or, and we can walk her through that, because it's normal. You think going in that your story, and everybody's story is unique, absolutely. But you think that, like, why am I crazy? Am I crazy that this just triggered me so much that I have to leave the classroom, and being allowed to do that, and really being met where you are. And there's not an expectation of you have to behave this certain way. You can't ever get mad. You can't ever cuss. You can't ever scream. That's crazy. I mean, the life that we come from it's chaos all the time. And so, just really being allowed to, process how I needed to process it. Like, how I told you that when I got there, I said he loved me the best way he knew how. I would say that in trauma group for months. And I'd say I know he's a dirtbag, but he's my dirtbag. And And then one day I realized that he didn't love me and that he'd been trafficking me. And I broke down and I was just sobbing. And they let me do it, you know? They let me come to that realization on my own rather than saying, no, he didn't love you. You're wrong. He didn't love you. Because there was nobody in the world that could convince me that he didn't love me.
Yeah, you would have just left the program if they had said that to you, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's so important to let these women really have the opportunity to kind of walk that journey at their own speed.
Man, that's good. You seem like now you have a pretty good understanding of even how to help other women coming out of it. What's your role now? I mean, what is your responsibilities at Engedi, and do you feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment doing that?
Yeah, it's like my dream job, actually.
Wow.
I am the director of client support. So I essentially do all case management. So, from the intake, I do, an interview along with other staff members, do the intake process from when, they call the program, to, helping her get her ID and her birth certificate, social security card, just those essential things. And then in phase one, it's a pretty strict program in the sense that, there's no cell phones, there's no internet. You have a list of people that you can contact that are safe people. So, in phase one, it's really just helping them get through the time, talking them down when they want to leave, helping them understand why they're reacting the way that they are. And then when we get to phase two, helping them find a job and kind of balance that new life. They're all so eager to go back to work, and then they realize that it can be really traumatizing, working 30 hours a week and getting, a paycheck for $200 when you're used to getting that sometimes in an hour, And so, helping them with that. Sometimes I get to, not teach them how to drive, but, they want to get their license and get a car. And so Aaron and I'll go on driving lessons with them and just kind of get them reoriented and reintegrated into the community.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of conflict resolution. You put 6 women in a house together and there's bound to be enough drama to fill a week up. So there's a lot of that. And then, I also facilitate the peer mentoring group. So we meet weekly and talk about just kind of like, how do we go from that life to this life and do it well? And what does that look like?
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. How important is it, do you think, that we get we're so excited. You've been walking with us for 2 or 3 years. We've been raising money, trying to find the facilities, get the right staff. How important do you think it is for people watching that are from Spokane for us to get this program launched and to think bigger than just Spokane? Why is it so important that we have this and that we're working with organizations like you and organizations in other cities so these women can get out of their environment and come to Spokane and get help?
Yeah. because there's no other program. I mean, I don't want to say there's no other programs, but your typical, drug and alcohol program that insurances pay for 30 days, they don't deal with the trauma of what it's been like having to sell your body for sex since you sometimes were 13 years old. And there's simply not enough programs like HRC and Engedi. Yeah, yeah.
How important do you think it was for you to get out of Seattle and go to Bellingham?
It was huge.
Yeah.
I would have left had I been closer.
Okay.
And Spokane has a high prostituted women rate. I mean, I remember going over there and having friends over there, and it's a hot spot. And so if you're right there, the first time you get mad, or the first time you realize, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. This hurts too much. Because I tell the women every time, this is one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to do, is go through this program. But when you get to the other side, all those tears, it will be so worth it. And if I would have been in Seattle, I can't tell you how many times I would have left and just gone right back to what I was comfortable with. People don't understand, they think, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible, and how can they live through that? And it is horrible, but you get used to it and it becomes your normal, And so it's not normal for prostituted women coming out of the life to have people who just want to help you and who don't expect anything else.
Yeah.
And that takes a while to get used to. And it takes a while for that trust to be built. And so, having a program in Spokane it's essential, because, there's women in Seattle that need that distance, or Idaho, it's absolutely essential. Yeah.
And Getty they kind of bent over backwards for you because they liked you so much. How did you, how was it? They actually, the reason why there's, I think, phase 1 and phase 2, and the reason we're doing 2 different phases, is in case of in a situation like yours where a woman comes in and they can't do 9 months because they're going to have a child. So you actually, through this whole process of phase 1, you were pregnant. And how did that all go?
I slept a lot. It was, it was hard, because I also have a daughter who was living with my mom an hour and a half away. And so rebuilding that relationship was so important to me, because I had let her down so many times and I had traumatized her so many times with my behavior. I was a heroin addict for 15 years. And so it was really important for me to get reconnected with my daughter. And then doing the program pregnant, I knew that if I didn't carry it out and finish it all the way, I wasn't doing myself any good. Like, I was determined to finish this program out and to get everything that I could out of it, because I knew that I needed all that they had. And I'll say that June did end up going to prison for 7 years. So he just recently got out. I was lucky enough to there's a program in very close to Engedi that we're not affiliated with, but it's a home for homeless women and their children. And so I actually had Claire in phase one, and then was able to become what we call a community student. And so I was living off of campus, so to speak, and then going to classes every day. And then when my older daughter finished the school year out, then she came and moved in with us. So it was the three of us.
That's awesome. How did that? A lot of people hear that like Engedi, if a woman has children, they think, "Oh, are you guys set up? Is Engedi set up to take a woman and their child?" And could you speak on that a little bit, because I think it could sound heartless if people are listening, that you maybe wouldn't take a woman and their child, that you would have them wait until they got through phase one and kind of go the other route. Could you speak to that and
Yeah.
how much work it was to build that relationship back, and how most of the women don't actually have custody of their children when they're coming into the home?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, thankfully, my parents, my mom was raising my daughter, and so I never had CPS involvement. So that made a huge difference for me. But I wouldn't have been able to focus on what I needed to focus on and heal if I was also parenting, right? And for me personally, I don't believe that a child should be in that environment. They need to have their own healing, happen. But you really have to be 100% focused on what you're doing. And my battery is running low. I need to plug this in. Can we pause this so I can go get
Yeah.
How do we do that? Okay.
Just
all right.
push the
I'm going to
pause button.
Okay. Hold on.
All right. And we're back. So before we took the little bit of a pause, you were talking about how you were lucky because you had some loving parents that were raising your daughter, and that you didn't have CPS involved. But for the majority of the women that have gone through the program, oftentimes CPS is involved, and they've lost custody of their children. And so, do you guys in phase two start helping them process how to get their children back? Because kids need their moms.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge supporter on reunification when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And so if they are CPS involved, that's one of the first calls I make is with their caseworker to let them know, to start building that relationship. And we allow the women to have Skype visits with their kids, which I think is important. They get those weekly. And then it allows the women to deal with their trauma, like I said, without having to be a parent. Being a single parent is one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, and if you had to deal with the trauma, it's horrific to dig up all that stuff. And then you have to go home and deal with, whatever age it is, but temper tantrums and homework and trying to get that, it would be way too much for expectation on a woman. To be able to parent. And they also need time, and I can speak from experience, to rebuild that relationship. My daughter, she did not trust me. She did not think that this was going to last. And so there was a lot of healing that had to happen between her and I before she was ready to come back in, and be in my house.
Mm.
And so I think that it's really a journey that you have to do on your own in order to be a better parent.
Yeah. It's pretty important for the church to be involved in your child's life too. I mean, that's what's interesting is when you have situations like that, it just shows how important it is for the body of Christ to really come around a family and to help the child and to help the mom and be in the process of that reunification. What you guys are,
Oh, absolutely.
you,
Yeah, I had no
yeah,
idea what biblical parenting was.
yeah.
I didn't even know it existed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
This brings me to the next thing. How important is it, do you think, that Engedi and HRC are faith-based and that we rely on the community support to be able to keep that faith element into our program? How important do you think that was for you?
For me, and I say this often, the difference, not the only difference, but the biggest difference between the other programs and Engedi was the first faith-based program.
Hmm.
And I know without a doubt that it was Jesus who saved me.
Hmm.
And I can look back now and literally see how he plucked me out of the situation and dropped me exactly where I was supposed to be. And learning, to love yourself again and that you are forgiven. I thought that I was just this piece of trash that nobody would ever trust again. I was a liar, I was a thief, I was, you name it.
Hmm.
And to know that you're completely forgiven and that Christ died on the cross for that exact reason, it's huge.
Hmm.
It's absolutely huge. And so for the community to come around, we love our volunteers and our community supporters, and we couldn't do it without them, because I think, I don't know too much about the finance end, but when you start getting grants from the government, that's when they can start coming in and dictating and saying, you have to take, you can't say Jesus, or you can't, talk about the Bible in your program or whatever it might be. And so having that, individual donor base and community support is huge. We have businesses that we work with that, will give the women a job when it's time for them to start going back to work, because these women, like me, I have a huge criminal history. And so there's some that, they wouldn't ever take a chance on them. And so building those relationships is essential,
Yeah.
in just getting the women to be independent for the first time sometimes in their life.
Man, Jill, thanks so much for taking all this time. I've got a few questions, final questions, but I just want to say thank you. It's amazing to me. If I saw you for the first time, I would never have a clue that that's your background, and that you had that much of a background of drugs. It's just amazing to see how much God's changed you from the inside out. And it's
Yeah.
exciting to me to see your daughter and to have her help you set the Skype up and,
Yeah.
to know the backstory and to see you guys smiling. And I mean, I see that in this house, we will serve the Lord behind you. It's just amazing to see this. And what would you say to the young women that are, 14, 15, or even in women in their 20s that are thinking about getting into the life? What would you say to them if you had an opportunity to? there might be
Oh,
some watching right now that are thinking
yeah.
about, falling into that, going with that guy, or, wanting that extra money. What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's so much to say. Um, you know, it's just, it's a lie. It is all a lie. Satan works so hard to make it look glamorous, and that you're going to be, driving around in Mercedes and going on trips. And no, it's not like that. You are going to be, living in motels, or, you know, crack houses, um, and you weren't designed for that. Like, God has so much more to offer, um, your life, and you just, it's a lie. I think that's what I would try to get them to understand the most, is it is not true. None of it is true. It is hell on earth.
A couple questions that a lot of viewers have always asking us, and people that write in all the time. One of the most frequently asked questions is, why don't victims just escape when they have the chance? And I know that you've kind of talked briefly about your story and really opened your story up to us and allowed us in so that we could see the conflict of even why
Yeah.
you went back, because you were dope sick and all of that. But
Hmm.
could you explain to maybe the church community, why wouldn't victims simply just escape when they have the chance, so that we can have grace and understanding and not just view people that might be out on the street? You know how sometimes in the church we can be the most judgmental and say, well, they're just a
Yeah, for
prostitute,
sure.
or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I get furious when people say that, and people have asked me that so many times. Well, why didn't you just leave? Um, I didn't have anywhere to go. I mean, there's so many times where these traffickers are so, um, there's books out there on how to be a pimp and how to be a successful pimp, and they manipulate your mind to a way that you can't understand it. Like, you do not believe that you will be able to survive without them. And so leaving just doesn't seem like an option. It's far more scarier to think of what it would be like, you think that you're going to be working at McDonald's and, living in a shelter for the rest of your life. Um, I would say that that's part of it. Other times, you know, you love your pimp. There was a time where I loved I loved him. I thought I did. It wasn't love, but I thought that I loved him, and I thought that he loved me, and I thought that I deserved it. Every time I got, my a beating, um, I I thought I deserved it. I thought I had done something wrong. What did I do to make him wrong? I shouldn't have said that. I should have, came home sooner. I got the wrong brand of cigarettes, or whatever it is. You blame yourself for it. And so, the I'm trying to think of the word, not the mind control, but the trauma bond is so strong that, it takes a lot to get through that.
Hmm. What do you think makes some women more vulnerable to sex trafficking?
Um, I think that there's a lot of things. I think it can go back to, not having a father around, not having a male, a good male influence. Um, I think that's probably a huge one. Um, you low self-esteem. Um, I think parents need to be very cautious when their teenagers are in their rooms for 12 hours a day on Snapchat. Um, who are you talking to? What are they saying? Because these guys, they can. June used to say that when he was beating me, he would say that he was breaking me down to build me back up. And it was true, I had no sense of self-worth. I had no sense of self-value. And so, you know, being that timid girl, um, who doesn't really look anybody in the eye, they can manipulate her in a second and make her believe that, she can change the world with him, and they can go and be, you know, stars together, or whatever the line is.
Hmm.
But I think one of the biggest things is the men in their lives. They need godly men who show them what love is, and show them what respect is, and show them, what honor is. And unfortunately, we don't have enough of those type of
Hmm.
men.
Yeah, and society's really kind of stripped away um, wanting men, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've got an awesome organization in town called the Spokane Fatherhood Initiative, and they're working on trying to raise up fathers. And it's weird to me that
Mm-hmm.
there's other organizations out there that hate the fact that they're doing that. It's mind boggling to me.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
What final two questions.
Yeah.
What are a lot of times people have this idea of who a buyer might be.
Mm-hmm.
What are the buyers really like, and is that affected at all because of the porn industry?
Yeah. I think that porn is legalized rape, basically. It's on-screen rape. Those women, if you for 1 second believe that those women want to be doing that, that's a lie in itself. There is somebody behind them that is collecting that money or is convincing them to do that. No woman grows up and wants to sell her body and be tortured and, subjected to the things that you're subjected to. And so I think that porn normalizes it. Um, and, there's kids, my daughter told me in middle school that she had a friend who was addicted to porn, and she would watch it all day at school. And this is a 13-year-old girl. Um, and so I think that porn, it just normalizes it. Um, and then the second part of your question was what? Because I had a good
Who are
answer
the
for it.
buyers?
Oh, the buyers. And everybody. I mean, they look like you. They look like, the construction guy, the guy on Wall Street, the crackhead. I mean, they're anybody and anybody. Unfortunately, you can't pick them out and say like, oh, he would
Mm-hmm.
never do that, because he's the one that's buying it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think it's really important for men in the church to start talking about it, and to start holding each other accountable um, for their what's the word I'm looking for? Not misgivings, but for
Their
I
actions.
can't think. Yeah, their actions and their sin,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, it's keeping it a secret isn't doing anybody any good, you know? And so really getting honest with it, I think is huge. And, you know, we're starting to see more and more programs where, you know, men are holding each other accountable. There's like Men of Dignity out here. And I think we need more of that.
That's awesome. Final question. What can parents do to decrease the chance of something like this happening to their children? And what might they be able to do to get some training in that?
Yeah. So for parents, pay attention to what they're doing, who they're with, who they're hanging out with. Social media I hate social media. You know, I think it's really dangerous. You know, Snapchat and Instagram, and, you know, if your kid is sitting in their room, you know, for, like I said, you know, 6-10 hours a day, what are they doing in there? Who are they talking to? And, you know their passwords, know the parents of where they're going. My daughter's 16 years old. She has her own car, and you better believe that I know where she's at, not just because I have an iPhone and I can track her, but also, you know, I know the parents, and I know, you know, what their beliefs are, and be honest and talk about it. You know, you got to talk about it. And my daughter knows everything, not everything, but, you know, she knows that I was trafficked. She knows, obviously, that I was an addict. And so we talk about it, and we talk about the why, and where I was at the time, and, you know, that I thought it was going to make me feel better. And I wanted love so bad. And so just be aware, have those hard conversations. You know, no parent wants to have those conversations, but somebody's going to talk to your kid about it. And so it might as well be you.
Absolutely. All right, Jill. Well, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on, and I'll follow up with you a little later today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to get over there and see you guys and see what you guys got going on. And I just pray that God continues to just bless you guys and give you wisdom and guidance. And you guys are in for a ride. So I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys. You're awesome.
All right. See you, girl.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.